So this is going to be my video about Midnight. Namuri Kayama, Miss Midnight, however you want to put it, the R-rated hero, the modern hero art history teacher at UA High School, friend of Aizawa and, Present Mike and all this other fun stuff. Hero, very much. So I wanted to do a video about Midnight for a while now, and at some point I'll probably end up doing videos about a lot of the other teachers as well, but this is just another random, I guess, installment. Well, not random in the timing, but another installment in my, 10 good things that happened to them and one bad thing, but it's a lot of bad things that happen to heroes and such. So given that the anime has just wrapped up and that the English dub of the anime is just about caught up with the Japanese, and they have aired the episode where it does pretty much declare that Midnight is dead, which she is dead, unfortunately, and that hit me hard when they did that in the manga, and of course it hits hard when you see it in the anime and everything. I wanted to do a video about Midnight. So, well, I wanted to do a video about her anyway, but I'm just like, I think I'm going to wait until after the anime has at least finished up with her story arc. Again, I would love it if they ended up doing an anime of vigilantes. I don't think they will, but I would love it if they did, because Midnight plays a very good chunk of a role in vigilantes, and you learn a lot about her throughout the course of vigilantes. A lot about her and Aizawa and Present Mike in regards to their past, and more about their relationship with each other and such, and Oboro. So starting off, Miss Midnight, Namuri Kayama, Midnight, the R-rated hero. She is the former, well, she's deceased now. She's the former modern art history teacher, modern hero art history teacher. Her personality can go back and forth because she can be very sweet and everything like that. She thinks all of the children are adorable and everything. All the students are adorable and airy and everything. But then she also gets very sadistic in regards to her personality as well, because that's where her dominatrix theme comes into play, and that's definitely where that comes from. So I'm going to go over a bit of her basic, her abilities and her equipment, and then go more into her history and stuff. And I will be going over some of the events that happen in Vigilantes, because those are a big part of kind of setting up some of her character. So in regards to her abilities, her overall abilities, she's the teacher at UA. She's highly tactically and she's a highly tactical and formidable opponent, and how she uses her quirks and how she uses her weapons, and just how she fights in general and stuff like that. She's maximized her ability of how to use her quirk and how to make it as effective as possible. We see her, she does enjoy tormenting her opponents, as we see in, the final exam arc and other points in time. We see her having to deal with villains and stuff like that. If she can, she likes to toy with them if she knows that she can take them out easily, but in other cases she will get down and dirty, like we see what happens with Gigantamakia near the end, which again I will go over. In regards to, she also has very high intellect. She also has the modern art expertise and everything, as being the teacher in that regard. We don't see too much of that throughout the course of the anime. I think we maybe get a tiny bit more of it in the anime than we do in the manga, with seeing the kids in class a little bit. I wish we would get a little bit more of that, but that didn't happen. But we know that she's the teacher there. And then in regards to her quirk, which is the kind of the crux of her fighting ability, she has, and I'm probably going to mispronounce this, and I apologize, somna, I can't say it, I'm sorry, somnambulist. It basically results in her being able to produce a pheromone from her body that allows her to put people to sleep. generally men more than women, but the more that you're attracted to her, the more that it can be affected. Um, I was gonna compare it to like poison ivy, but poison ivy can affect both genders fairly easily, but she tends to manipulate men more just because that's poison ivy's, prerogative, which is fine. But in regards to Miss Midnight, her quirk is a sleep-inducing aroma that her body produces that will put anybody that smells it, particularly when I think it even gets stronger if she's drunk, makes it even more powerful. And that's why her suit, which I'll get into her costume later, that's why her costume is made of the very thin, like latex or whatever that she can easily rip and then, releases the pheromones easily that way. She can use it in small, close quarters combat and unfortunately, in regards to that, it also can put her opponents to sleep, but it can also unfortunately put her allies to sleep, if they're not, paying attention. But she can use it to put large groups of people to sleep. We see her utilize this, I think a couple of times in Vigilantes, and then I think we also see her use it a few times during stuff that happens during the battle at the chateau where the Meta Liberation Army is. The Paranormal Liberation Army, excuse me, where they are during that frontal assault that they do. She puts a lot of them to sleep that way with her power. And then in regards to her equipment, so she has her Whips of Love, which is, all of her, things are usually dominatrix theme one way or the other. She has her Whips of Love, which is, of course, her, the main whip that we see her use a fair amount of the time. She also has a slightly more fanned version of the whip that she uses as well. And then she also has her feather fan that she uses to, spread out her, uses it to spread out the scent so she can affect a larger area at times. And then she, of course, has her ultra thin fabric suit, which she uses in regards to being able to release large amounts of her, quirk at any given time, or in smaller amounts depending on the circumstances. I would assume that she does not just release it all the time. It's not a constant thing that gets released. It's like she can control when it gets released, because that would be very annoying. And the fact is that because there's still parts of her hands are still showing and her face are still showing even with her costume on, she would still be releasing some form of the quirk if she didn't have a control over it. So when she was a kid, she probably had to practice a lot to learn how to control that power, so she's not just putting everyone around her to sleep at any given moment. And then, she learns how to get it to the point where she can control when it comes out. Probably very similar to the way that Mina would probably had to train with her quirk, from the fact that, Mina produces acid. And she's, of course, she has trained herself in how to, release very low levels of acid to the point where it's not corrosive at all, and exceedingly high levels of acid where it can be very corrosive. And, of course, with Mina, the same thing would apply. If she just walked around without any control over her quirk, she could just release acid at any point in time and not be able to stop it. Midnight probably had to go through a lot of training in that regard as well. I'm sure some of the other heroes had to go through lots of those types of training as well, just so it's not this constant thing that they have to repress. It's just it's subconsciously is repressed unless they're ready to use it. Like Denkan has electricity. There's another option there. And I think that goes over most of her equipment. I did want to point out, I will talk about Midnight's costume, which I'm going to get into in a second. Now, in regards to a lot of the stuff that we see in the Vigilante stuff, when we get the flashback of her and the three Demigos, which is Aizawa, Present Mike, and Obro, back when they're in high school, back when they're at UA themselves as students, a lot of her costume is exceedingly very, very revealing, and I don't intend on showing any of those ones specifically here. Mostly because it's manga panels, and I don't know exactly what I can get away with those necessarily. And also, it's just very revealing, and I don't want to risk anything like that getting affected. Midnight's suit is revealing enough. Even though you technically don't see anything, it's very suggestive in that regard, of course. So in regards to her history, I just realized I don't think I ever put down her age in any of this. I think she's in her 30s. Given the time frame when we get for like when her and Aizawa and Oboro and President Mike would have been at UA, I think it does put her in her 30s range. But in regards to that, during Vigilantes, we get a big flashback that shows all of them in high school. Midnight is a year older than Aizawa and his crew. She was doing her hero studies with the Purple Revolution Agency, and her trainee was His Purple Highness, which is a reference to Prince. I was just like, I saw him instantly, and I'm like, well, that's a reference to Prince and everything, or the artist formerly known as Prince or whatever. And I love that they threw that in there because that was fun. We have not seen him in the main story. The problem is I don't remember if he died or not. At any point in the flashback, I do not remember if he died. We know that, spoilers, we know that Oboro dies, unfortunately, but I do not remember what happens to His Purple Highness at the moment. That might be in my notes, but I don't remember at the moment because it's been a little while since I read that part of the Vigilantes manga. But Midnight, of course, has her exceedingly revealing outfit, which is just basically a utility belt and pouches that go over certain body parts on her chest. And then like a coat that she wears that's like a long trench coat. So it's like a flasher type of a thing. And I'm just like, oh, good God, I don't know how the school let you get away with that. Do not know how the school let you get away with that. I guess you can write it off as like, I need to be able to have a lot of skin showing in order to release my quirk to the best ability and stuff like that, kind of the way that like Momo gets away. But even Momo's clothes aren't that revealing in regards to how she dresses. But, we see that she at least knows who the three Demigos are. And then she, of course, invites them to intern at her agency. They also bond over a cat. Which is just adorable, that the four of them kind of help take care of and such, this little kitten that they save. And then she, of course, invites them and they come and, I don't remember if it's all three of them or if it's just Oboro that comes and ends up interning with His Purple Highness at the Purple Revolution Agency. But like they all end up interning and, getting to know each other a lot better and everything. She's like the upperclassman and everything. So she would be it would either be Kamaya Senpai or Namuri Senpai, I think would be the correct term for that. So we go through that and everything, and we see them getting, all four of them getting stronger and everything. And of course, the boys comment on her outfit, and they're just like, okay, are you sure that you're allowed to wear that? And she's like, nah, it's mine. It's fine. I'm good. But, they go through all of this training and everything, and they eventually end up, they fight a lot of villains during this time frame. We get to see Aizawa be a little bit happier during this time frame than he had been, than we're used to seeing him. He's still like, grouchy Aizawa, but he's a little bit more fun-loving at times in this one, in the flashback that we get. But eventually they do end up having this big battle that ends up happening between them and a bunch of, several villains. And unfortunately, during this battle, it does unfortunately result in Oboro's death. And, or at least supposed death, given the fact that we now know that he was basically turned into an exceedingly high-end Nomu that is, Kurogiri later on. But at the moment, he is dead. We see Midnight and Aizawa and President Mike all just devastated by this because they lost their friend and they're still training to be heroes. And it's one of those moments where they have that flash of reality, that bang of reality, that you are going into a career, training to go into a career where any given day could be your last day, or your partner's last day, or your friend's last day, or your colleague's last day, because you don't know what villains you're going to have to fight. This wasn't, I don't even think that the person that they were trying to deal with was this exceedingly high level villain. It's just, they were still students, and bad things happened at the wrong moment and everything, and that unfortunately did result in Oberon's death, and that's just something that all of them have to deal with. And eventually, the three of them that are remain, Midnight and Present Mike and Eraserhead all decide, we're just going to keep going. We're going to still become heroes. This is what we trained to do. This is what we told Obero that we were going to do. And we are going to keep going forward and train our butts off. And they do. And eventually, of course, they all graduate from UA. Midnight would have graduated the year prior to them, but they all graduate and they all go off into like their own hero agencies. Or Aizawa becomes the underground hero and everything. And of course, Present Mike goes to start building up his, DJing career. And of course, Midnight, we go into this at one point in a conversation later on in the anime and the final exam arc, but I'm going to point it out here now, just to start off with. When she first debuts, Midnight's costume is very revealing, and it resulted a lot of regulations going into what her costume can look like in regards to that. So she changes it up, and that's where like the very thin fabric comes into play and everything, and she can still have her dominatrix theme. She is the R-rated hero Midnight. But so that way she can still have that theme, but it's not quite as revealing, but it still alludes to the fact because the fabric isn't like exceedingly, it's not like it's dark colored. It's, not too far off from her skin color, but you get the idea. Also is probably used to like throw the villains off or whatever. But it is stated that she is technically the reason why they have certain guidelines. And then she also builds up her own, I don't think it's her own agency specifically, but she has like her own sidekicks that are called the Midnight Boys. Oh God, those boys are, I feel sorry for them. They're basically very young, cute boys that she keeps around her. And, trains up into heroes. I mean, she still does her job as that. And at some point in that time frame, she does end up becoming a teacher at UA as the modern, hero art history teacher in that time frame. And then we jump ahead into where the Vigilantes takes place, which is where we get some more information about her. We see her a fair amount throughout this part. She becomes, she's around Aizawa a lot and everything, and she's kind of the one that actually gets him into being a teacher, because I think she has him sub for her a couple of times. And so that's kind of where he starts, kind of seeing what it's like to be a teacher. And eventually, of course, we know that results in him becoming a teacher at UA by the time Izuku and his class are there, or a couple of years before then, because Vigilantes, I think if I remember correctly, takes place 3 or 4 years before My Hero actually starts, before, like Izuku's story actually starts, and such, because it's like during the time frame in between when All Might defeats All for One for the first time, and then when he rises again and everything, because we see All Might has already had his injury and everything like that, and he keeps having to go back and forth between his big form and his skinny form and everything, and we see him get to meet the cop and everything during that time frame, and they become friends. But Midnight builds up a good rapport with a bunch of the characters that are the vigilante characters, Slider and Pop Step, and I don't remember if she ever ends up meeting Knuckle Duster too much, but she ends up around a lot of them a lot, and she's there for various other events that happen throughout the course of the Vigilantes thing. I know that at one point, one of the major things is, during the climax of, the stuff, that she ends up, at the climax of Vigilantes, that she ends up having to, the final performance arc where, Pops has been infected by the honey queen, or the queen bee quirk, and, they end up having to, Midnight uses her powers to put her to sleep so that way they can remove the queen bee from her. And then they take her to the hospital, and then Midnight watches over her while everything is going on. She even, I think, refuses to let the cop in because she knows that Popstep is innocent. She was manipulated and then the queen bee quirk was put into her. That's what caused her to do all of this bad stuff. It was not her choosing to do it. Because Midnight is familiar with what's going on, and she helps with all of that. And she also uses her quirk. She can use it. She's mastered her quirk well enough to the point where she can, she can like put a whole bunch of people to sleep, which we see her do earlier on at one point when she's like in disguise, and then she like activates her quirk when there's like this villain attack at like a department store, and she just like puts everybody in the area to sleep with her quirk, and such. But then later on, we also see that she has enough mastery that she can at least release her pheromones in just enough amount to like just make people calm down a little bit so they're not like panicking and stuff, which is a very useful way of using her quirk. Headcanon that I have on that I just realized is that I'm sure, because like Aizawa and Present Mike are not immune to her quirk. Just because you're friends with her does not make you immune to her quirk. But if it was, I have a feeling that at some point in time, like she may have had to deal with one of them or both of them having like a panic attack about what happened to Oboro or something like that. Something else bad and happened and it triggered something like, PTSD, which definitely a lot of heroes have, and she probably has as well. In regards to that and other things that have happened, because every hero has people that they couldn't save, whether it was their friends or whether it was a civilian or whether even it was a villain that like ended their own life and they just didn't get the chance to save them, or help them, or whatever the case may be. Midnight probably has used her quirk to like calm down people as well, so that way she can like try to like talk people down or like calm the villain down enough that they're able to apprehend the villain without anybody else getting hurt. If putting them to sleep doesn't work, then calming them down. And probably use that to like calm down civilians as well, or even other heroes. So we get a lot of that. She protects Popstep while she's in the hospital and everything and keeps her safe. And healing, a whole bunch of other areas. She tends to stay around and helps with, protecting a lot of the other civilians and stuff like that. Because admittedly, Midnight is like good crowd control and stuff like that in that regard, and like keeping the civilians away, keeping them calm with her quirk and everything, so they're not panicking. Because if she can control how strong her quirk is at any given time, then she would be able to just like either calm them down or, just put them to sleep directly and then like calm them down and then like get them out of there. Stay calm, listen to the police officers, they will send you where you need to go. Listen to the heroes, they will send you where you need to go. I would assume that if you're exposed to her quirk enough, you could probably build up some form of an immunity to it. So yeah, possibly, but for the most part, we don't see that happen. But yeah, she's there a lot. She's of course very supportive of a lot of the vigilantes of like of Crawler and Popstep and stuff like that. After everything happens and everything, she's very supportive of them and like kind of keeps in contact with them a little bit. And then moving into UA. So the first time we're introduced to her in UA is during the USJ arc. She is one of the teachers, of course, that shows up at the USJ when the students and Aizawa are under attack there by the League of Villains and stuff, and by all the different, mini, bad guy villains that are there that they gathered up for the attack. And she's one of the teachers that is brought there by Ida after he escapes and is able to get the teachers there, along with a whole bunch of the other ones and Nezu and everything. We see her there. We don't really get a whole lot of show of what she can do, but they get everything calmed down and everything, get the villains taken care of that haven't been taken care of yet by the students and Aizawa and such, and get all the students to safety and Aizawa and 13 all the medical attention that they need and everything. And then we see her a little bit more. We see her a lot more during the sports festival arc. Like she's, I think, part of the discussion where they're trying to figure out like how the League of Villains got the information for where the students were going to be, and that All Might was going to be, an assistant teacher that day and everything. We see her during that meeting there with the one cop whose name I cannot pronounce that has the truth-telling quirk, and everything. And then during the sports festival, of course, she is kind of the moderator for the whole thing. She is the one that does, all the announcements and everything like that for the, at least for class, for the first year students. We don't see anything for the second or the third year students, in regards to like who's being the host for that. But I would assume it would be Midnight also, because she just seems like she loves doing that. She loves being the center of attention in that regard, which I am fine with. But we see her there. She gives like the whole instructions for like, this is how the obstacle course works, and this is how the cavalry battle works, and this is how, the matchups and everything are going to go for the battle section of it and everything. And, we see her doing that. And, just having her fun time there and everything. And, like, she roots for the students because she wants them to succeed and everything like that. And we see her, be impressed by different things. Of course, the way that Izuku uses, the mines, the fake mines to, make like an explosion to like propel himself forward and other things like that. And of course, she also just like seeing the students, fighting against each other. I know that I remember during the fight between, or the battle between, it was between Kirishima and Tatsu, that, at the end of it, just like their quirks are so similar that it's so hard for one of them to win, so they have to have an arm wrestling contest, and Kirishima wins, but they're both very manly and gentlemanly and everything, and, Tatsu is just like, I wish you luck and everything like that, so she's like very, pleased by that. And thinks that that's a very, very good way of showing camaraderie, I can talk, between the two classes and everything. And then also when Mashiro has to end up kind of like he forfeits because, or several of the students, Mashiro, and I think it's the one that one of the other class students from class 1B, withdraw from the tournament because they were manipulated by Shinzo via his quirk, and they don't think that they deserve to be there because they didn't get there necessarily on their own merits. They were being manipulated, they were being controlled. So she accepts their withdrawal and everything and finds it very, very honorable what they're doing and everything and such. So we see that. And then during the fight between, I believe it was between Shoto and Sero, when Shoto just like freezes the entire field because he just had the argument with Endeavor, he just freezes the entire field, including, Sero, before he's able to do anything really. And Midnight's just like half frozen, and she's like, "Do you forfeit, Sero?" "Yeah, I can't move." "Okay, I can't either." "Shoto, can you make the ice go away?" and stuff. So we just have that funny scene there with them. And then of course, she's there, during the battle that happens between, I think several times throughout the battle between Izuku and Shoto, she tries to like make them stop because Izuku is causing so much damage to his own body and everything. She tries to make them stop, but they keep going and everything. So she's there during that fight. And then during the fight between Shoto and Katsuki, during their battle, when Shoto is down and Bakugo tries to go and fight him again, even though he's down, because Shoto wouldn't use his fire against him, even though he used it against Izuku. And of course, Kacchan looks at that as being disrespectful, and that you see me as less than Izuku, blah 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 blah. That's one of the first times we see Midnight use her quirk, and she just like rips her sleeve and she releases the quirk, and it results in Bakugo just like falling asleep. So we have that. There's not too much else that we see there with them. Not during that fight. We don't get too much else. And then the next time that we kind of see them is during the Hero Killer Stain arc, the Hero Killer arc, where all the students are getting ready to pick their names and everything like that, that her and Ectoplasm and I don't remember who else, but like they all show up into the class to help with like the kids picking their names and everything. And of course, she, adjusts, Yama's name, and she, nixes Mina's name of Alien Queen, which I think would have been much better than Pinky and everything. And, she, helps all the students with their names and everything and such. And but she won't let, she won't let Kachan have, King Explosion, Murder God, or whatever it was that he wanted to have, or Death God, or whatever the comparison was. She won't let him do that. Fair enough. And then going into the final exam arc, which I mentioned before. First part of that arc involves, because all the students, we see them studying and everything, but then we also see Midnight is on a daytime talk show with Mount Lady. And they're discussing costumes and stuff like that. And this is where this is in the anime and in the manga, this is where we get the reveal of what Midnight's original costume had been. And Midnight explains, it's like, well, I had to have a lot of skin showing because that's the way that my quirk works. That the more, that if I have the ability to release the pheromones, that I can put people to sleep and everything and stop the villains. And they're like, yes, we understand that, but that doesn't mean that you have to have all of that skin showing and have it be that revealing of an outfit. That's not required. And that, she's the reason that there's all of these different, all these different regulations in regards to costumes and such. So we see that, and also this is her and Mount Lady end up getting into an argument because Mount Lady says that she has always looked up to Midnight for years and years and like commenting on Midnight's age and such, and that results in them, fighting during the interview. And then we go to where they have the actual final exam. And of course, she ends up having to be the teacher that fights against Sero and Mineta. Much to Mineta's glee, of course. Starts off as glee, turns to horror, because she just put Sero to sleep instantly. And then very quickly, and then Mineta proves himself in regards to being able to actually find a way to get past her power and everything by using Sero's tape, and he uses his sticky grapes to refer to them as that instead of something else, to trick her into like having her whip pinned to her and then having her whip pinned to the ground to the point where she can't get away because she's stuck in place with his grape brush. So good on Mineta for that. And of course, he gets Sero out of there and everything, but he is able to pass and everything, and Midnight is proud of him and everything. Sero technically doesn't pass, so he has to do like all of the additional training at the camp. And then we go into the forest training camp arc and everything. She's not there for a large amount of it. I don't even think we see her that much in it. We see her a little bit. I believe we see her a little bit when they're at the school and stuff later on. When they're discussing things about the incident and everything. Like I know that she shows up at the camp when like they're trying to deal with all the students' injuries and everything and dealing with the villains afterwards and everything before they go and try to save Bakugo and such. So we see her there, and she's part of like kind of like coming up with the plans on like how to get everything, but she's not really involved in any of the raids that they do, either on where the Nomu are or on where the League is. She's not involved with that at all. Mount Lady is, but she's not. So there's not too much else that we see there. But they all, she's part of the discussion to try to figure out like who the traitor was at the time. Of course, we find out much later on that the traitor was Aoyama, unfortunately, and such. So there's that. And then we go into the provisional license exam. And she, I think, is part of that in regards to helping with train the students and, getting their quirks more and like getting their, their ultimate moves going and everything. That she helps with, encouraging the students to come up with their ultimate moves and everything for, that your move is something that represents what you want to be, what you want to show to people and everything. So we have that. So she's during that. There's not too much else. that she's involved with during that. I don't really think we even see her that much during like when the students are off doing their training and everything. She's, happy for the students, of course, when, so many of them get their, exam, they get their, provisional license exam and everything. There's not too much else. She helps, we see her more, I think, focus on, Fumikage and everything with helping like with his ultimate move and everything. Different things like that. So she's there like helping the students along and guiding them along and everything. We don't see her during the My Hero section of the story. Vigilantes, we see her being a hero a lot and everything during that stuff, but during the Vigilantes, we don't see her out on her own very often. But it's assumed that she's, just like with Izawa and just like with Present Mike and everything, that she has other stuff that she does. And she goes off and, she does do patrols and everything like that in different areas and stuff like that. But her main job is being the teacher and also still being the hero to train the heroes and everything. So there's that. We don't really see her at all during the Saikai arc. So there's not really anything there. I think she like points Izuku like where, All Might is or whatever at some point in time. But that's all that we see her in that arc, I think. And then in the school festival arc, Izuku, when Izuku and Mirio are showing area around, they do end up meeting Midnight and Nezu in the cafeteria and everything, and they end up talking about the sports festival, or not the sports festival, the school festival. And she's like, well, we want the school festival to go off without a hitch, but unfortunately there is the problem that if there does end up appearing to be something where villains are trying to attack, then we may have to shut down the school festival and everything. And of course, Izuku does not want that to happen because, of course, him and Mirio want to have Eri get to come to the school festival and, have a good time and everything like that, which of course she does. There's not too much else there. We see her like a little bit, but not very much. I think, I trying to remember, she may get to see the performance that Class 1A puts on, and I'm sure she was probably around, like, seeing some of the other performances and stuff like that the other students were doing, but not too much else. And then during the joint training arc, where we have, Class 1A and 1B battling against each other in Ground Gamma and everything, Midnight is there with All Might to watch the competition and everything, and she's not the commentator. Vlad's the commentator this time around, but she's there and everything to help, like, grade the students and everything. And, she's very happy about how, far the students have, progressed in their skills and everything. So we get that. And she's very impressed by what Shinzo can do and everything, how he's learned to use his quirk more and everything in his own training with Izawa and such after the sports festival. And that she is, that Shinzo has her full support, like trying to move on to join one of the classes, either after the next semester, at the end of the next year or so, depending on stuff, for joining one of the hero classes. So that's good. We see how much she is in regards to like supportive and, cheering on all of the students and everything like that during the time frame. And then we get into the Endeavor Agency arc, which we have, there's the time where all the students having to get used to being interviewed and everything, because of course Shoto and Bakugo ended up being in an interview and it didn't go exceedingly well. So they bring in Midnight and Mount Lady again to, come in and try to help train the students in how to do better with, interviews. Which, Midnight doesn't do too much with that. It's mostly Mount Lady that helps with trying to get the kids to be better when it comes to, answering the interview questions and everything. But Midnight's there. Their relationship seems to have gotten slightly better, but we don't know. They don't really interact that much. She's just kind of there in the background, unfortunately, in regards to that. But yeah, so they help with that and everything. And of course, Midnight is there during the discussions when it comes to what the Hero Public Safety Commission wants them to do in regard to the students' hero work courses and internships and such, with having to be required and everything, and how she doesn't think it's a good idea, but they have to go with it. So we have that and such. And like none of the students end up having anything that results in, being with her for their training. They're all with different other heroes and stuff. I was trying to think if there was anything that resulted in that, but I don't think so. And she's horrified, of course, by what happens in Zeka City and everything when they find out a lot about that stuff and everything. And then we move into the Paranormal Liberation War arc. So at the beginning of the arc, at the beginning of that section of it, that section of the anime for this last season, Midnight is one of the heroes. It is at the front of it with a whole bunch of the other heroes, including some of the students, including Denki and Mudman from Class 1B. I cannot remember his actual name, so I'm sorry. Actually, I popped mine all of them up there, but I don't remember what his actual name is. But that they're there because those ones are all very good at crowd control, because part of what their intention is, and it's a very well done thing, a very well executed thing with all the information that Hawks has been able to get to them and everything, that her intention is to, or the intention is to have all of these ones that are very good at crowd control come in so they can just like get rid of a whole bunch of these different Paranormal Liberation Army members in like one fell swoop. Not kill them, but knock them out, take care of their quirk. That's why Denki's there, because he can absorb the electric quirk of one of the other bad guys, one of the other Paranormal Liberation guys. Midnight's there because when they get in there, she can let loose a huge amount of her pheromones and just put a whole bunch of people to sleep and everything at that given point in time. They have Kamui Woods there, who's like trap a bunch of them with his branches and everything like that, so that when they can't escape and then they can fall asleep that way. Med can mess with the ground and make the ground all mud and quicksand like stuff and trap them in that. So we do very good at that one. There are several other students that are in there as well. Kinoko, who is the mushroom girl, she's there, and she results in a whole bunch of mushrooms all over the place that make people cough, so they can't really fight very well. So they deal with that, and also when they're getting ready to charge in, Midnight sees that Denki is very nervous and everything, which is understandable. She does not downplay the fact that he should be nervous or the fact that he is nervous or anything like that. She doesn't blame him for it. She doesn't criticize him for it. She just says, I understand that you're nervous, and I understand that you're nervous about having to be here at the front and everything with just all of these heroes and a couple of the other students, but you're here because we need you to help with crowd control, and because you are very useful against one of the people that they know that they have in here, because he has an electric quirk, and you have an electric quirk, and you can absorb his quirk, so that way we don't have it where he can mess with our communication signals. Very understandable, very well thought out, very good use of those quirks. And she's just like, but I need you to remember why you're here, why you're fighting and such. And of course with Denki, it results in him thinking back about Koyoka, about earphone jack, which I am perfectly fine with Denki and whoever else they want to put him with, or Jiro and Momo and however many other comparisons you want to go with that. But Denki and Jiro, I was just like, they would go great together. He clearly has a huge crush on her and everything, with everything that we've seen between the two of them and such. So I just think they work very well together. But back on track. They attack it's the chateau or whatever thing, the villa that they are. And Midnight uses her, Denki absorbs the power, all these other ones are going off. Midnight, releases her quirk in a huge amount in regards to knocking out a whole bunch of the others, and a bunch of the other Meta Liberation Army cronies and everything that are there and such. So we get that. And then we get her, running through that area and knocking out more people in that regard, probably using her whip at various points to stop people and things like that. And then we get where everything happens with Gigantamakia. So during this time frame, everything else is happening with Shigaraki at the hospital and the hospital raid and everything like that, with Mirko and Endeavor and Izawa and all of that. And of course, Shigaraki wakes up, exceedingly overpowered, ends up calling Gigantamakia, and he wakes up and starts just charging out of the villa and toward where Shigaraki is. And during this time frame, Midnight and Kamui Woods are running after them and everything, trying to catch up to him. And Midnight is like, get me close to his face. I can release a huge amount of my, quirk, and hopefully we can knock him out, or at the very least slow him down. And for Mount Lady's credit, she's there trying to hold off Gigantomachia as well, trying to pin him down. And unfortunately, the League of Villains is on the back of Gigantomachia at this point in time, and they, Mr. Compress releases a bunch of rubble that gets thrown at them at Midnight and at Kamui Woods, and they get knocked down. And we see Midnight is taking a lot of battle damage. Her costume is very ripped apart, a lot more than we've seen it. She's bleeding and bruised and everything during this fight. And she's, she contacts Momo and she even says it's just okay, I understand if you want to run, but I need you to try to stop him. I need you to try to come up with a plan. And it's, it's she doesn't blame them if they want to run and if they want to try to escape, but she's just we need to find a way to slow him down. We need you to do that. And, she's very sorry that she has to try to get them to do that. But she, they need to slow Gigantomachia down for all the different, damage that he is causing and could cause with, his path of destruction and everything. And during this time frame, that's when Momo comes up with her plan of we're going to, she makes the different, canisters that are filled with the different anesthetics that he can use to put, that they can use to try to get Gigantomachia to fall asleep. Let the truck go past. And, try to do that and everything. And of course, Momo and the rest of the crew do a great job with that and everything. And via Kirishima, they are able to finally get, the anesthetic put into Gigantomachia, and eventually it does end up working and resulting in him falling asleep and everything when he gets caught up to Shigaraki and everything, what happens with Best Genus and all of that. So we get all of that. And then at the end of the arc, we cut to where, we're getting kind of the list of the dead, the cost of what this battle cost us. This is, the bill has come due, and this is what has been paid in that regard. And we see, all of these other heroes that unfortunately have been lost, including Majestic, that was Momo and Blizzardy, trained with and everything, and a whole bunch of these other heroes, unfortunately, that I did a whole other video about a year and a half ago or whatever, when I went over a bunch of the other heroes that have died throughout the course of My Hero Academia. And I went in that one in a lot more detail, and yes, I included Midnight there, but I wanted to do a specific video about Midnight. And we see that, and it's Izuku narrating it and saying, this is what happened. We captured these ones. They're put away, but we lost this, and we lost this one, and we lost this hero and this hero. So many were hurt, so many were injured. Aizawa lost his leg, Mirko lost an arm and a leg, all this other stuff. And, all this other stuff that we see happening. And we cut to where we see several of the students, Momo, Kirishima, Mina, and Sugarman, Rakido, that they're all there, and they see, they're all there, and we see them crying over Midnight, and we see her mask off to the side, and it's all torn to shreds and everything. And, we see Mina, holding Midnight's hand, and they're like, please wake up, Miss Midnight, please wake up. This isn't funny anymore. Because, Midnight is a little bit of a joker, was a little bit of a joker in that regard, but it's not that. She's not joking, she's not pretending, she's not getting up, and she is part of the list of the casualties. It is assumed that she is buried, although given everything else that's happening at the time frame, with so many different heroes that are quitting during this time frame that happens, with so many of the other ones that have died and that were exceedingly injured and can't keep going in certain cases, and so many of the civilians that were hurt and trapped and died during this circumstance and everything that happened because of Shigaraki and the Nomu and the Paranormal Liberation Army and all of this. that yes, it is assumed that Midnight was buried and that there's probably going to end up being a memorial for all of the people that died during this incident, but I highly doubt that that's been done already, because at the moment, at that point in time, chaos is ensuing. There's villains on the run because, All for One and Shigaraki have worked on releasing a ton of them from the different prisons and everything. And they're going to go all out and cause chaos and everything as much as they can. Whether at the full on at the behest of, All for One, or because they just want to do it themselves, they're going to go and do that. And, as, payback for being locked up and everything. And yes, the students want to mourn the fact that they lost their teacher and, all these other ones that they lost and everything. I mean, they didn't lose any of their classmates in that time frame, but they could have lost Bakugo. And Shoto had a whole lot of stuff that happened with them, and the whole community is going up against, the whole country and the public and everything are going up against what happened because of what happens with Endeavor and what Dobby reveals and everything. And all of that happening at that point in time means that, yes, they were probably either buried or cremated, depending on what happened with all these other heroes and civilians and stuff. But there's so much other stuff that's going on that they can't focus on this other stuff. They can't properly mourn, and they can't properly start getting everything cleaned up yet, because there's so much other stuff going on, because the country has basically put into a state of chaos at this point in time. And eventually, I would like to hope that when this final battle with Shigaraki and All for One and all of this finishes up, when everything's taken care of, when hopefully they're all either dead or whatever ends up happening with Shigaraki, I have my own opinion about that there will probably be something that ends up being built, another monument or a memorial, something like that results in this thing that has all of this list of all of the different heroes that died during this and all of the different civilians that died during these circumstances, during this battle, and during the battle that happens right now with Shigaraki and All for One again, to show what has been happening, to show like all of these ones that we lost, like this was the cost and what it resulted in, and is this a good payoff for how the world ends up being. And we'll probably hopefully get another reference to Midnight in that regard, either through Aizawa's eyes or Present Mike's eyes, depending on certain circumstances, but that's just my thought. So this video ended up being longer than I wanted it to be. Sorry about that. But I really liked Midnight. She was one of my favorite teachers at UA. Nothing against Aizawa and Present Mike and a bunch of the other ones, but she was one of my favorites. I loved her design. Her quirk is just great and how she uses it and everything. And, at the end when we see the way that her students just, the way that her students miss her and how they're just like so devastated with the fact that they lost her and stuff, goes into what happens a lot of the time in those cases. And such. So that's what I have. I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Comment about, what you liked about Midnight or whatever. And I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye.